There is a difference between learning something new and allowing that something to shape your whole life. We learn all kinds of things every single day. We allow some knowledge to influence us more than other knowledge. We pick and we choose. That's what makes us human, this free will thing. That's what we do. And there's a difference between learning something new and embracing it so much that it actually changes how we live. Example. A couple years ago, I learned something that blew my mind. I learned something about the universe that totally changed a lot of things that I assumed to be true. Are you ready? I'm going to share it with you. The universe is expanding at an accelerated rate. Nothing from you people. A lot of us know this already, maybe. But it blew my mind. You hear all the time that the universe is expanding, right? This is part of normal physics. We've known this since the 1920s. The universe is expanding, and that knowledge has trickled down to us in many different ways. But a few years ago, up until I learned this, I always kind of assumed that gravity was a thing, and that the gravity produced by all the stars and galaxies in the universe would pull on one another and eventually bring the expanding of the universe to a halt, or maybe at least slow it down. I assumed it was slowing down. I'm thrilled to tell you that most other, physicists, I'm not a physicist, but I play one on Sunday mornings. But physicists were under the same way of thinking that I was. Up until 1998, everybody assumed gravity is making the universe slow down in its expansion. Well, in 1998, some Nobel Prize-winning physicists proved that the universe is actually accelerating. The expansion is speeding up all the time. So it didn't just blow my mind, it blew the mind of physicists everywhere. Okay, fine. So I learned this new fact. Is this new knowledge something that I'm going to incorporate into my life and affect my day-to-day living? Probably not. But I did have to think twice about it when I was told what this fact about the universe means. There's something called a theoretical physicist. And a theoretical physicist is someone who takes the math and extrapolates, says, if this is true, then we know this must be true, even though we can't prove it yet. And so there's a theoretical physicist named Brian Greene who was interviewed on a podcast, and he shared what this ever-accelerating expansion of the universe means. He said this: if the universe is expanding, that means that stars and galaxies are rushing away from us here on Earth. And if distant galaxies are rushing away faster and faster, then sooner or later they will rush away from us faster than the speed of light. Very unfamiliar idea. Most people think nothing can go faster than the speed of light, but it's true. And what that means is that stars and galaxies will rush away from us faster than the light they give off can travel back to us on Earth. So we won't be able to see them anymore. So if you look into deep space in the distant future, it will just be black. Inky black stillness. We'll think that we are an island oasis in a universe that is static. Once everything rushes away so far and so fast that we can't see it, we will lack the diagnostic test that shows us that the universe is expanding at all. Which means that astronomers in the very far future, assuming they exist, they will look out into space and come to the wrong conclusion about reality. Does this knowledge change my day-to-day life? Not so much. But Brian Greene thinks it's important for us to know that the fact the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate, the definition of that fact means that there will come a time when the instruments and thought processes that we currently use to understand the universe will only lead us to the incorrect conclusion. And the way of life that Jesus exemplified teaches us the exact same thing. That the instruments and thought processes we currently use to understand this life we are all going through can lead us to the incorrect conclusions. We try to live our lives according to what the world offers us. So we become convinced that life is about nothing more than making money, gathering possessions, consuming as much as possible for the cheapest price. We try to figure out who we are and where we belong based on the rules of the world. So we identify with people who look like us, who act and behave and live and think like us, which means that we start to see anyone who is not like us as strange or less than or dangerous. We accumulate our values through a billion tiny interactions every single day, leading us to conclude that life is too short, filled with too much anxiety and stress, and the best we can hope for in this life is the least amount of struggling before we die in the quickest and most painless way possible, which is exactly when we cease to exist. The world teaches us that nothing matters more than being certain, knowing that you are right, you're correct, you are justified. And as long as you can know that in your heart, you have the right to live any way you want. These are the conclusions we draw from living in this world. But just as Brian Greene's future astronomers will be looking out into an inky black universe filled with nothing, scientifically convincing themselves that there are no distant galaxies or stars, 2,000 years ago, a man named Jesus said to his people, "I get why you believe what you believe. I just think you're coming to the wrong conclusions." The way of life Jesus exemplified affirms, yes, all those things about the world are true, undeniably true. But you are first and foremost a beloved child of God. And you are invited to live as God's beloved in the world. All that's required of you to accept this invitation is to understand and see the universe as God does, as revealed in the life of Jesus. Beloved, whole, blessed, enchanted, loved. When we try to see the world the way God sees, we can only come to the conclusion that there is no separation between ourselves and our neighbor. We're one and the same. There's only opportunities to love one another. The world divides us and defines us as enemies or opponents of one another. And when we see the world the way God sees the world, we just see other beloved children of God. We see opportunities to love. We do not see enemies. We see people that are more difficult to love than others. When we begin to see the universe as God sees the universe, there is no separation between humans and nature. There's no separation between people and God. because God so pervades the entire universe. Every tiny molecule is so completely filled with the miracle blessing of creation that we cannot be separated from the divine or from one another, not even in death. The Easter story says that Jesus was resurrected. That's the story. You're not even hearing that for the first time. You've probably heard that many times throughout your life. But the choice to shape your life around that information or not is entirely up to you. But on this morning, let me act as your sort of spiritual, theoretical physicist and at least tell you what this story means for our lives. It means that the world is shot through with a divine love that we cannot escape, that we cannot be denied. Death itself cannot take us from one another, because God is so present in everything. All the particles that make up our bodies in this room are the same particles that have existed since the dawn of time, and they will be the same particles that go out into the world when we die and get recycled to make new stuff. We are inextricably linked forever. That's the revelation of Easter. That's what happened on that morning when those disciples saw Jesus appear before them. We can go back and forth all day about whether it was a physical resurrection or not. The point is, God is so present with us that death on the cross could not even tear Jesus away from his beloved people. And as if this isn't good news enough, as if this shouldn't just change the way we see everything in the world, it gets even better, because it turns out we aren't even expected to believe this good news. It's right there in the story that Beth so beautifully read before. It says right there in the story that the 11 disciples found Jesus on the mountain, worshipped him, and, I quote from Matthew 28:16, but some doubted. I mean, we can be forgiven for our doubts, right? Our lack of faith. It's 2,000 years later. We ain't seen no Jesus. But apparently even the people who were there on that morning, they had Jesus right in front of them, and even they were saying, this is crazy, man. There's no way this is happening. We don't even have to believe this good news for it to be true. No more than we have to believe that the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate in order for it to be true. The universe is the way it is. God has built the system to include suffering and death, yes, but also to include this divine grace that is found in every moment of our lives and beyond our lives. And not only is there nothing we can do to make that happen, there's not anything we can do to keep it from happening. The women were scared from the earthquake, and they had the revelation of Jesus among them. The disciples doubted, and they had the revelation of an ever-present God who will not abandon them. They doubted. They feared. You know, I could have sworn that all through seminary, I read all these hundreds of years of theologians saying, you have to believe a certain way in order to make this happen. Or you have to behave in a certain way in order to make this happen. I'm almost convinced I heard that somewhere, that your faith or your good works will save you. Friends, it's so much better news than we've been told. The universe is the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. You are loved wholly and completely, and death itself does not tear you away from all that is. It brings you closer to it. What does this mean for our lives? It means that we can continue playing by the rules of the world. We can continue treating one another as if we are essentially different. We can continue finding any reason at all to fight and make enemies with one another, to disagree and feud. We can find all the reasons in the world to go to our respective corners and never build community together. We can allow some people to continue to be treated like gum on the bottom of justice's shoe. We can say that some people are just deserving of a worse life than us. Or we can live into the resurrected life. That's what the resurrected life means. It means you bring yourself, you be just who you are, just the imperfect, fallible, wonderful human being that God made you to be. And if you're willing to see the world, or attempt to see the world as God does, that everything is actually one, new life is yours. Thanks be to God.